I have collected the most frequently asked questions which are collected after consulting with top industry experts in the field of design patterns, ASP.NET and Spring Framework. If you want to brush up with the MVC basics, which I recommend you to do before going ahead with this MVC interview questions. In this video, I list top 20 MVC interview questions with answers with proper examples. To start MVC interview questions and answers session, I request you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and press bell icon to get real-time updates of interview questions and answers, which is helping to prepare the interview.
Explain what is MVC?
MVC is an abbreviation for Model, View, and Controller. The MVC architectural pattern separates an application into three components: Model, View, and Controller. In this pattern, the model represents the shape of the data and business logic. It maintains and preserves the data of the application. Model objects retrieve and store model state in a database. The view is basically and technically a user interface. The view segment displays the data using model to the user and also enables them to modify the data. The controller is the part which handles the user request.
List out a few different return types of a controller action method.
There are 5 different return type of a controller action method: view result, JavaScript result, redirect result, JSON result, and content result.
What are the advantages of MVC?
Benefits or the advantages of MVC are as follows. First is multiple view support. Because of the separation of the model from the view, the user interface can display multiple views of the same data and at the same time. Second is change accommodation. User interfaces tends to change more frequently than business rules. Third is separation of concerns. Separation of concerns is one of the core advantages of ASP.NET MVC. The MVC framework provides a clean separation of the UI, business logic, model or data. Fourth is more control. The ASP.NET MVC framework provides more control over HTML, JavaScript, and CSS than the traditional web forms. Fifth is testability. This framework provides better testability of the web application and good support for the test-driven development too. And sixth is lightweight. MVC framework doesn't use view state, and that reduces the bandwidth of the requests to an extent.
Explain the role of components presentation, abstraction, and control in MVC.
Presentation. It is the visual representation of a specific abstraction within the application. Abstraction. It is the business domain functionality within the application. Control. It is a component that keeps consistency between the abstraction within the system and their presentation to the user. It is also used to communicate with other controls within the system.
How to maintain session in MVC.
The session can be maintained in MVC by 3 ways: temp data, view data, and view bag.
What is MVC application lifecycle?
Any web application has 2 main execution steps. First, understanding the request and, depending on the type of the request, sending out an appropriate response. MVC application lifecycle has 2 main phases: first, creating the request object, and second, sending the response to the browser. Creating the request object includes 4 basic steps. Step 1, fill route. Step 2, fetch route. Step 3, request context created. Step 4, controller instance created.
What does the MVC pattern define with 3 logical layers?
The MVC model defines web applications with 3 logic layers. The business layer means model logic, the display layer means view logic, the input control means controller logic. The model is the part of the application, which only handles the logic for the application data. Regularly, the model objects retrieve data, as well as stored data, from a database. The view is the part of the application, which takes care of the display of the data. Most often, the views are created from the model data, although there are other, more complicated methods of creating views. The controller, as the name implies, is the part of the application that handles user interaction.
What is Spring MVC?
It is a Java framework which is used to build web applications. It follows the model view controller design pattern. Not just that, It also implements all the basic features of a core Spring framework like inversion of control, dependency injection. Spring MVC provides a dignified solution to use MVC in Spring framework by the help of Dispatcher Servlet. In this case, Dispatcher Servlet is a class that receives the incoming request and maps it to the right resource such as controllers, models, and views.
What is ASP.NET MVC?
ASP.NET MVC is a web application framework. It is lightweight and highly testable framework. MVC separates an application into three components: model, view, and controller.
What is MVC Routing?
The URLs in ASP.NET MVC are mapped to action methods and controller instead of physical files of the system. To accurately map action methods and controller to URLs, the routing engine forms appropriate routes. Using this, the controllers can handle specific requests.
What are the filters?
Sometimes we want to execute some logic either before the execution of the action method or after the execution. We can use action filter for such kind of scenario. Filters define the logic which is executed before or after the execution of the action method. Action filters are attributes which we can apply to the action methods. Following are the MVC action filter types. Authorization filter implements the authorization filter. Action filter implements action filter. Result filter implements a result filter. Exception filter implements the exception filter attribute.
What is partial view in MVC?
A partial view is a chunk of HTML that can be safely inserted into an existing DOM. Most commonly, partial views are used to componentize Razor views and make them easier to build and update. It can also be returned directly from controller methods. In this case, the browser still receives text/HTML content but not necessarily HTML content that makes up an entire page. As a result, if a URL that returns a partial view is directly invoked from the address bar of a browser, an incomplete page may be displayed. This may be something like a page that misses title, script and style sheets.
Can you explain the page life cycle of MVC?
Below mentioned steps define the page life cycle. App initialization, routing, instantiate and execute controller, locate and invoke controller action, instantiate and render view.
What is the use of view model in MVC?
View model is a plain class with properties, which is used to bind it to a strongly typed view. View model can have the validation rules defined for its properties using data annotation.
What do you mean by MVC scaffolding?
Scaffolding is a code generation framework for ASP.NET web applications. Visual Studio includes pre-installed code generators for MVC and Web API projects. You add scaffolding to your project when you want to quickly add the code that interacts with data models. Using scaffolding can reduce the amount of time to develop standard data operations in your project. It consists of page templates, entity page templates, field page templates, and filter templates. These templates are called scaffold templates and they allow you to quickly build a functional data-driven website.
Explain the concept of Razor in ASP.NET MVC?
ASP.NET MVC has always supported the concept of view engines, which are the pluggable modules that implement different template syntax options. The default view engine for ASP.NET MVC uses the same ASP/.ASCX/ master file templates as ASP.NET Web Forms. Other popular ASP.NET MVC view engines are Spart and Haml. Razor is the new view engine introduced by MVC 3.
What is GET and POST action types?
GET action type. GET is used to request data from a specified resource. With all the GET requests, we pass the URL, which is compulsory. However, it can take up the following overloads. POST action type. The POST is used to submit data to be processed to a specified resource. With all the POST requests, we pass the URL, which is essential in the data. However, it can take up the following overloads.
Mention the benefits of area in MVC.
Benefits of area in MVC are as follows. It allows us to organize models, views, and controllers into separate functional sections of the application, such as administration, billing, customer support and much more. It is easy to integrate with other areas created by another. Also, easy for unit testing.
Mention what are the two ways for adding constraints to a route?
Two methods for adding constraints to the route is using regular expressions, using an object that implements your constraint interface.
How can we implement validation in MVC?
We can easily implement validation in MVC application by using the validators defined in the system.componentModel.data annotations namespace. There are different types of validators as follows: required, data type, range, and string length.